Hello, everybody. David Shuster here, and thanks for joining us. So, where to begin? Um, I do these videos, the reporting and the news analysis, because I very much believe in the noble cause of enlightenment, of helping all of us better understand our communities, our nation, our world around us. And I often think that, through better understanding and enlightenment of things that are happening out there and things that are happening, whether it's in our politics or Mother Nature or whatever it is, the way we interact with each other, that we learn, that we as a society progress, that we can figure out here's what works and here's what doesn't work, and here are the mistakes from history, and here's how we avoid making those mistakes. And so I very much believe in these sort of videos and what my colleagues and I do to try to help keep all of us informed. This video about the 2024 election is different because, frankly, I don't know how to make sense out of Donald Trump's reelection. I'm not quite sure about what it means for the future going forward. I do know Donald Trump is an adjudicated rapist. He's a convicted felon. He was impeached twice. He has repeatedly used fear and hatred and division to gain his power. And he's just proven that those horrific tactics are more powerful and politically effective than unity, than giving people hope, than lifting people up. And I think we may have some very dark days and months and years ahead. Donald Trump has pledged to start deporting 11 million undocumented migrants by possibly creating camps. Is it possible that he will round people up, that he will encourage law enforcement agencies, maybe use the military to start rounding up undocumented migrants? He might. It'll cost a fortune, but he has pledged to do that. Would that follow the Constitution? Would that follow the basic rights and decency that we have tried to afford to our fellow human beings? On crime, Donald Trump has said that he wants to give police immunity, that he would love to see police spend at least one day just beating the crap out of people that police suspect may be criminals or thugs. Not that a judge and a jury have determined are criminals, but that police don't like. Donald Trump thinks that they should be able to rough people up, to beat the crap out of people, and get away with that. How would that work? On health care, Donald Trump has pledged to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. So it's possible that the law, which now requires people with pre-existing conditions to still be able to get coverage from health insurance, that now health insurance, if the ACA goes away, will kick you off. That if you've got a pre-existing condition, too bad, you don't get insurance anymore. You have to cover whatever medical bills you face yourself. On the economy, Donald Trump wants to impose, hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs. The way tariffs work, in reality, is that those costs get passed on to the American consumer. So economist after economist has said that imposing tariffs on goods that are coming in from overseas will cause American consumers to have to pay a lot more and will hurt the economy. That economic growth will be stifled by it. But putting aside what may happen in the United States, overseas, Ukraine, which was invaded by Russia nearly 3 years ago, Ukraine is now essentially going to be left to be carved up by Russia because the United States, under a Donald Trump presidency, is going to go back to being America first, isolationist, not supporting Ukraine. So Ukraine is on its own, and Russia's going to get what it wants after 3 years of war. And maybe because of the United States perhaps pulling out of NATO and Donald Trump not supporting European allies, maybe Vladimir Putin decides to go into Poland next. We're headed for some, I think, dangerous and frightening times overseas. We're headed for instability and confusion and chaos here at home. So I appreciate everybody's anxiety and fears. I get it. And I totally get the temptation to want to shut down, to check out, to say, I can't keep doing this, to move to Canada or wherever, or move to Scandinavia, as one of my relatives suggested. I understand it. I appreciate the anxieties. But I want to remind everybody that all of us in our lives, no matter whether you think that, we're headed for the worst under Trump presidency, or whether you think, we still have the American guardrails of democracy. There's only so much Donald Trump can do. And don't worry about, Donald Trump's Project 2025. He disavowed it. Don't worry about the firing of 50,000 government bureaucrats and replacing them with Donald Trump loyalists. Don't worry about the FBI and the Justice Department throwing out the rule of law because the leaders and the prosecutors will be replaced by Donald Trump loyalists. Don't worry about the prospects that if you commit a crime, but you're loyal to Donald Trump, you will not be charged. But if you don't commit a crime and Donald Trump doesn't like what you're saying, well, the military could shoot you on the street. And don't worry, by the way, about Liz Cheney or General Milley being tried for treason, as Donald Trump has suggested. Maybe that all was just talk. And maybe the guardrails of democracy and the guardrails that are supposed to exist in our Constitution will prevent some of these impulses. And maybe it won't be as bad. But I get that people are anxious and fearful. I get it. And so I appreciate the desire to check out or to give up. But I want to remind everybody that part of our human condition is that all of us at different points in our lives have gotten knocked down personally, professionally, and have had to deal with things that are far more anxiety producing and perhaps challenging in our own lives than seeing a political outcome that we don't like. All of us of a certain age have had to deal with the deaths of siblings or parents or children or relatives. We've had to deal with being fired several times, career setbacks, industries disappearing, economic stability going out the window, our communities being hollowed out, perhaps a medical scare, not having the bills to pay it, total anxiety about something happening to our kids. We have all had to deal with things that you would describe as adversity. And most of the time, I would suggest, most human beings, the human condition is, yes, you get upset, you're frustrated, and maybe you want to cry, you want to put your head in the sand, but you get back up and you keep going, not because you want to keep going, not because you want to keep trying, but because you have to. Because your family depends on it, because your friends, because your children, your relatives, everybody's counting on you to keep going. And so you do. And you take one step after another, and you get back up, and you try to learn from your mistakes. And Lord knows, some of us have made a lot of mistakes in our life, professionally and personally. You try to learn from them and you keep going and become wiser. And as you keep going, you realize that your happiness is not dependent on a sports team winning, a politician winning, about a particular outcome around you, that your happiness is up to you. I like to say that you don't have to go back very far in history. Imagine the worst that has happened over the last, 150, 200 years. Slavery, the Holocaust during World War II, the soldiers who were killed storming the beaches at Normandy, whatever it is, there have been some horrific, horrific times for our fellow human beings. And yet you can find in every one of these incidents, there are people who, despite all the chaos and the bloodshed and the carnage around them, are still able to find moments of happiness, of camaraderie with their fellow human beings, of love. Despite everything, despite all the horrible things going on, they realize, you know what? I can still make the best of the situation and find a moment where, yes, horrible things are happening around me, but my happiness, my ability to connect with a fellow human being, my ability to tell a joke, to laugh, that's up to me. It's not up to the government. It's not up to the country that you're living in. Your country, where you live, what kind of community you're in, what's happening around you doesn't automatically determine your happiness. You get to determine your happiness and find your satisfaction and find your joy and find meaning in life. And so I just want to remind everybody that as devastating as this election has been to many of us and as frustrating, You're going to face a lot worse, unfortunately, in life. But I guarantee you, you've already faced worse in life, and you're still around. You're still looking at YouTube videos. You're still finding information. You're still finding a community of people around you who share and commiserate and can provide support. And that's what life is all about. It's about those sort of connections, about that love, about those, feeling in sync with your fellow human beings. So, again, I want to say to everybody, I get, for me, I have always revered the presidents of the United States. I love our institutions of government. When I see the White House, I still, something happens to me inside. Or when I see the Capitol or the Supreme Court, I have such reverence for the office of the presidents of the United States, for the people who serve our nation. And so it makes it that much more difficult for me to understand Donald Trump going back into that institution that I revere, that I love. But I think that maybe the way that I resolve this, and that all of us, who are so frustrated can resolve this, is realize maybe it's time to reframe things a bit. Maybe it's time for me to place a greater emphasis on, my local and community leaders, the people who are out there doing civic-minded work, but to try to help the greater good in my own community. Because I can have a greater impact on them anyway than I ever could, or that most of us could ever have over a president of the United States or even a U.S. senator. That old saying about all politics is local, it's true. You can make an impact in your community, on your block, on your street, in your neighborhood, in your apartment building. And when you start to make an impact, when you have a conversation with your neighbors, even people you may disagree with, you start to realize I have some control over the world around me, over my world that I'm in. And you start to realize that you can take back some power that way, and maybe even some confidence and some self-esteem and some hope. So I just want to, again, say to everybody, look, I have a conversation with our 11-year-old daughter today, who went to sleep last night thinking she's going to wake up and she might be witnessing the first female president-elect of the United States. When she woke up, we had to explain, nope, that's not the choice that was made. And she talked about Donald Trump's issues with lying, not telling the truth, and what it means. And we had to say, there's some people who that's not such a big concern to them. And we had to have a conversation about women's rights, and how women's rights was not as big a concern to most Americans as the cost of food, or whatever drove a lot of people. But we pointed out that life still has a way of sort of moving forward, that our society still has a way of making progress, that the American experience has often been a couple steps forward, a couple steps back. And I promised my daughter, and I make this promise to all of you, that this will not be the end of the world. This is not the end of the United States. That there will be a time when we do have a woman president of the United States. There will be a time when my kids and their generation see the kind of progress and the kind of understanding that they are hoping for, that maybe we didn't necessarily achieve in my generation. And that by merely staying involved, staying engaged, standing up for what you believe in, standing up for honesty, for decency, for shame, we start to make progress again. That just because we have a leader or a president in the United States, or president-to-be, who is engaged in fear and division, doesn't mean that we have to choose that. We can still choose optimism and hope and unity. And just because we have a president-elect who is known to be a liar, who lives in his own fantasy world, who creates his own version of reality, doesn't mean that we have to follow that. We can still adhere to reality and facts and the scientific method and the truth in terms of how we communicate with our friends and our family and our community. We have that choice. And every time we make that choice to keep moving, to stand up for the values we believe in, we take a step and then another step, and then we realize that, okay, it's just Donald Trump was elected president of the United States, It may be humiliating and embarrassing, but that does not define who we are. That does not control our happiness. That is not determinative of the future that you and I are all going to have. So, just a couple of thoughts. There'll be plenty of time, plenty of videos coming about sort of a reaction, about what the election, may mean politically for the Democratic Party and how Donald Trump was able to pull this off. And we'll save that for another video. But I just wanted to tell everybody that whether the result was the outcome you wanted last night or the result that you didn't want, whether you're fearful and anxious or whether you're happy, whatever it is, be good to yourself. Be good to your neighbors and your friends. And remember, how you treat other people in your life is more important than how a president or any politician treats other people around them as they try to govern. I hope that makes some sense. And I wish you all of the best in your journey as you move forward and take one step after the other. And remember, just be good to yourself. And thanks again for watching. I'm David Shuster. We'll see you on another video after some deep breaths here on Rebel HQ. Thanks again for watching.